like this, given the virtual nature of things, in the summer and in the fall. So we hope to see you soon. And with that said, what I'd like for you all to do, in addition to turning on your video, but as questions start to come in, please chat them, because in the end, what I'm going to do is I'll be facilitating and moderating some of the Q&A at the back of this presentation. And then you'll also get to hear a bit more from PPD and the Office of Career Services in terms of opportunities to keep guiding you towards your career transitions and your career kickoffs. So with all that said, Sergei Vadim, it's all yours.
Awesome. Thanks so much, Sean. Appreciate you having us. Thank you to Sean, to Al, to the Career Services team and the PPD team for putting this together. We've done a couple of events with Fordham University, and I can honestly say I think the students are lucky to have all of you, because you guys actually care about creating events that add value to your students, bring in external experts that can show the reality of what's happening in the market right now. That's really what we're excited to do today, is to give you some of our input about what we see happening on the ground now, and some of the stories that we'd like to share with you throughout our careers, because we've had some interesting experiences that we think y'all can learn from. But we also learned firsthand that being entrepreneurial is something that can help anyone level up in ways that you might not even expect right now. And hopefully through the stories that we tell, become more and more clear.
Yeah, so if you guys haven't noticed, for those of you that joined a little bit late, Sergei and I are identical twins. There's a reason why we both have beards. And so, we've actually been, had very similar parallel career paths, if you will. We started several companies together, and I'm a professor now at NYU, and Sergei is a venture investor at NYU, and we're also co-directors of School16. Part of the reason why we thought it would make sense to talk to you guys today is because we graduated into a pretty terrible economy as well. We graduated in 2008 when, with a degree in finance, mind you, both of us. We were supposed to move to New York City from Boston. We had offers in hand from the UBS, very excited to come to New York. And then when we were home, basically waiting to make the move right after graduation, we got the call that our offers were rescinded. So that's the reality of the situation. It has happened before. It will happen again. Recessions and depressions and economic events do happen from time to time. It's actually somewhat cyclical. And that's part of the reason why we're talking about being entrepreneurial about your career. It's no longer a choice. If you want to hedge against career risk, you have to be entrepreneurial about it. So we're happy to share more with you guys about our story, and then take questions obviously towards the end. But we also want to just mention really quickly about School16 before we jump in, and we'll talk about it towards the end as well. But we launched School16 to help people that are interested in a career in tech specifically, so startups or big tech. And we started off by actually offering free weekly classes, and the Fordham Foundry and Fordham in general has been really generous in helping spread the word about that. So some of you that are on the call may have heard of it already if you follow Fordham Foundry on Instagram. But we offer free weekly classes every Wednesday at 6 p.m. that are run by experts in the field. We've had sales leaders, product leaders, engineering and marketing leaders from places like Facebook, Google, Slack, and the like. And the idea is you hear directly from those people about the skills that are in high demand and about what they did to navigate their career in an entrepreneurial way, and how you can do the same. So if you're interested in joining those free classes, feel free to sign up on school16.co, drop your email, and you'll get invited to the next class. Quick comment, Sean, I don't know if it's because I kind of hear a little bit of background noise occasionally. Folks in general, if you don't mind muting yourself so that doesn't get picked up. Awesome. So quick agenda before we jump in. We're going to talk about our story. We're going to talk about, and it's going to be weaved in through the whole presentation, of course. We're going to talk about what to do when you have no experience, solving the chicken and egg problem. We'll discuss developing your skills on the job, how to know which skills to build, how to sell yourself. Selling yourself is very important. And building your network from scratch if you're starting from zero. Networking and building relationships is incredibly important as well. It's one of the best ways to get opportunities. And lastly, we'll end with some resources and tools that we think should be top of mind for people that are looking for opportunities right now.
Great. So yeah, just to kick things off again and to reiterate, we know that it seems pretty bleak right now since we're all at home. We don't have the opportunity to do as much, in-person networking with employers. Some of us on the call may have had job offers that are rescinded, internships that were rescinded. You're facing hiring freezes, even though you may have had great relationships with employers that they unfortunately can't bring you on. That is a reality that we're going to have to face with, and people that are most creative about their approach to finding jobs are going to come out the other end with positive outcomes. And I do want to impart on all of you here that just because things are hard right now, just because you might not be getting the best opportunities right now, doesn't mean that you can't set yourself up in this time to be able to get great opportunities and to grow your career. So that's really what we want to impart on. We started off also, like Vadim said, in finance. We thought we would be doing investment banking, be analysts, get paid six figures, and models and bottles, as finance folks like to say, right? That did not happen at all. This image that you see here was kind of more the opportunity that we got. I was actually unemployed for 6 months after graduating. It led to depression. It led to, having to ask my parents for some help paying rent. I did not want to do that. I was lucky enough to have that ability. I know I was fortunate, but back then it didn't seem like I was fortunate. And I did not want to take money from my parents. I think I asked for like 1 month, and then the rest of the time I was like, no, you know what? I'm going to figure out my own way, just because it wasn't.
He borrowed from me because I was the first one to get a job.
Vadim got a job a little before me, and my parents didn't have it easy either. They were running a small business, so we were just trying to. We shared a small 1-bedroom apartment in Boston, just to make things work. I didn't want to share a bedroom with Vadim because he snores, but anyway, it worked out. Sorry to out you there, Vadim. But we got these jobs in finance that were back office jobs. They were not glamorous. It was a step back from what we thought we would get, but at least it paid the bills. I think I was making like 36 grand a year at that point in that first job. Again, not the 6-figure salary that I thought I was going to get. But you know what? Having that job that I did not like, having that income that was barely enough to scrap by, kind of made us a lot more creative, made us a lot more entrepreneurial, and helped us think about the next step in a little bit of a different way. So for us, we were excited about tech. We were excited about starting companies at some point in our lives. And we decided pretty early on that that's the path that we want to take. So we figured out how to do our jobs. We actually automated ways. We learned Excel in a way that these guys that you see sitting there, nothing wrong with those guys, but they just were not willing to learn some of these models. And we were seen as like the experts. In fact, I automated my job where I could do half hour of work in my finance job, and people thought I was a genius, and I was just spending the rest of my time looking for startup jobs. And it actually took a year for me to be able to get out of that job because it didn't seem, I wasn't able to, I didn't know how to network yet at that point. But we did decide to move quickly in figuring out how we're going to get into jobs in tech. And for us, that meant taking things into our own hands. We knew there were 2 main ways where you can add value in a tech position, especially in a startup. And that is either learning how to build a product and all the roles associated with building, or learning how to sell that product and all the roles associated with trying to get business from a product. And as you think about your career and where you might enter, think about, am I a builder? Am I a creator? Or am I a seller? Am I a person that gets customers and brings value to a company by getting customers? So developing the skills independently was the way that we had to do that because we were not learning those skills on the job.
So I want to tell you a little story. We love stories. That's what I do in my courses as well, my 4 credit classes. So I think stories are a great way to learn. And we will tell you a story from our experience. It's the best way to solve the chicken and egg problem, to be honest. Sometimes you simply will not get opportunities until you seem valuable to somebody. There's a reason for that, right? You need to hit the ground running. And right now, you have to be willing to take on certain gigs that might not seem ideal, but that might accelerate your career in one way or another. And more importantly, that might give you some tangible skills that can be used in the job market and can be seen as valuable in the job market. And there's a few different ways of developing your skills independently. Obviously, one way is, for example, if you want to be a marketer, you have to show how you could do that yourself. You don't have to wait for permission to do that. You can set up your own web property. Let's say a blog is a very simple way to do that. And you can learn how to drive traffic to that blog or to that online publication or whatever, you know, your domain expertise is. And believe it or not, even though you're doing it just for yourself, no one hired you to do it for them, that is real experience that you can put on your resume and real experience that is valuable to other people. But I'll give you a more specific example as well. And this is also important to consider now, because even though there is some contraction going on in the market, even though there's a lot of companies that are laying off, there are other companies that are still hiring. And more importantly, there's going to be companies right now that are being resourceful with the capital that they do have, and they will start prioritizing people that are willing to take a chance for either unpaid internships or unpaid gigs or low paid gigs. And sometimes you have to do that for a time in order to make yourself look attractive to an employer. Of course, it's not sustainable to do something unpaid forever, but you can do it for a short period of time and still add it to your resume. And I'll give you a perfect example from my experience. When I was sitting in that job, in that office that looked exactly like that picture that you saw earlier, as a matter of fact, that was a sketch of that office that the company had done. I don't know why they did that at the time. Maybe they but that's the office I was in. And look, Sergei and I were miserable. He mentioned that it was back office job. We wanted to get out of there as soon as possible. We were getting some great skills, building Excel models, being seen as professionals and the like, that could actually get things done, but we didn't want to be there. And so I knew I wanted to get into startups, and I knew that I wasn't going to be a builder right away. I took some engineering classes in high school and in college, but I didn't know how to code that well. I wasn't going to build product for any startup, right? I wasn't going to be a valuable software engineer. But I did know that I could probably figure out how to sell. Right? I did some cold calling here and there for internships in college. I wasn't good at it, but I figured I could probably figure out a way to make myself seem like I'm good at it. And so I started applying to a bunch of sales jobs, and I got nothing. I heard nothing back. Even commission-based sales roles were not willing to hire me. But quite frankly, at the time, I was looking for something with at least a base salary. But I couldn't quit my job on something that was 100% commission, because I was getting paid similar to Sergei, 36, 40 grand out of college, and that was at least paying the rent, and it was pretty decent living at the time, especially for first job out of college in Boston in 2008. And so I wasn't willing to take a purely commission-based job, but I was lucky. I had a cousin that had just raised about $300,000 for his startup out of UMass Amherst, and he had an office literally down the street in Boston from where my office was with Sergei at the finance company where we worked. And so I worked out a deal with him. I said, hey man, I need to get some sales experience, but I understand you guys just raised 300 grand. You probably can't pay too much for your employees because you have your own employees to feed. But what I'll do is, if you're willing to do this, is after work, a couple times a week, I'll come in and I will make cold calls with you to the West Coast. They sold to small businesses and restaurants. And if I could just get some feedback from your VP of sales or you or whoever has time that day on how my calls are going, that's really all I need. I don't need to get paid for this. And it was a no-brainer for him. It was basically a free intern that he got. Now, yes, I was 23 at the time, so I didn't want to take a free gig, but I wanted to get out of finance that bad. And so for about 3 months, about 2 or 3 times a week, I would go to his office. They're a startup. They work till 7, 8, 9, 10 at night. My finance job usually got out by 5 p.m. So I would get a solid few hours of work done with him, and he dedicated his VP of sales to me every time, if he was free, to sit on the calls, give me a script to follow, and literally start learning what I would need to know to be good at sales. And within those 3 months, I got enough experience to put on my resume. Again, I wasn't there for years. I was only there for 3 months. But I got enough experience to put it on my resume. And within 2 months, I had a job at another company called Yodel. And that company not only gave me a base salary plus commission, and I was making more there in the end than I was in my finance job, but they also had a really formal sales training program, right? So whereas the first program or the first experience was more informal, one-on-one, almost like a mentor who that VP of sales became to me, this next experience was very painful training program in sales. I mean, every single morning at 8:30, we were there getting trained in sales, pitching the whole sales team. So in front of 50 people, you would have to often pitch, doing 75, 80 cold calls a day, but owning the whole sales process from prospecting to closing the deal, getting the credit card, and getting the deal signed. And within 10 months, I was later able to position that into another role. But by doing that, taking that first step to develop my own skills, I then got an opportunity to learn on the job in a more formal setting, in a company that actually had a training program that gave me those hard skills that I was then able to basically build my resume more and more on. So you got to remember, you sometimes have to take baby steps. You sometimes have to take almost a step back, if you will. But it is a marathon, not a sprint in the end of the day. And even in an economic situation that is not perfectly favorable, there are still opportunities that you can find.
That's exactly right. And you know, we're talking about here some examples about doing things on the side, right? We don't have unlimited time, but oftentimes you can find times like Vadim did in the evenings and sometimes on the weekends to participate on events. There's actually a reason why at School16 we offer our classes at 6 p.m. at night. We want to be able to have anybody, even if they have a job that they don't like or some other commitments during the day, to come and do something for an hour that helps develop a skill, you know, after work. Something else that we did early on in our careers is to try to go out there and meet other people interested in tech and building cool things. And there's a program you might know about called Startup Weekend that lets you, they're kind of like hackathons where you come and meet on a Friday night, and by Sunday night, you have a product that you pitch to investors. And it's just a way to meet other people, work on projects, and maybe you get to start a company afterwards. This is a Startup Weekend. We actually decided to work on this project. Again, we had full-time jobs. It was an idea that we pitched called Meetlie, where we wanted to help people learn from other experts by setting up office hours with them. It was a really simple concept, but we met some engineers and some marketers that wanted to build it with us. And we only ended up working on that business for a couple of months, but we did ended up getting written up by this publication in Boston, and that was something cool that we could put on a resume. We did end up meeting some investors that later on, we actually came back with other ideas we were able to pitch. And overall, it was a good way for us to say, look, I may not have a lot of startup experience, but here's a way that I went out of my way to learn how to build a product from start to finish. And we built this website, we built this technology, we were able to get some people using the platform, and we did all of that independently. All of a sudden, we could say we have sales skills, we have product development skills, and all these other things that we just didn't have before, and we did it independently by partnering with others and bringing this product to fruition. So I will tell you that even though now there's like no physical events happening, especially in New York, there are online hackathons. There are all of these programs that were in person are figuring out how to do this stuff online now. They're probably going to be able to be willing to take a chance on you now, even if you have not so much experience or no experience, because they still want people to participate in programs like this, and there's still a very valid way to meet people. So, you know, we decided to develop a skill in this way, but now you're sitting at home and you're trying to figure out, well, okay, fine. I want to make myself marketable to a startup, marketable to a tech company. How do I even figure out where to start? How do I figure out what skill I need to develop that is interesting and marketable? So I think the easiest way is to start looking at some of these entry-level jobs that you see at startups. This is actually on a platform called AngelList, angel.co. We'll share it in the end. But they show you exactly what the jobs are, the description. They show you the compensation, the equity and salary compensation, and they actually list the job, they list the skills that they want to see in you. So this is we talk about build versus sell, right? I'm going to be a builder for a company, add value, versus I'm going to be a seller. You know, what are some ways to be a builder? Well, you might be a designer, right? You might be an engineer. You might be a product manager. These are all things that have to do with building. Here's an example of a job, an entry-level job in design. And they will actually mention the specific tools, right? You see skills, sketch, envision, prototyping. These are tools that you can yourself go spend a couple hours a day for a week even, honestly. It doesn't have to be that long. Play around with that tool, and now you can say you're an expert in Sketch and Envision app, right? You've done prototyping tools. Again, you didn't have to have internships to be able to be marketable in that. Another example is maybe like a marketing internship, right? Again, look at this marketing internship description: writing blog posts on personal finance topics, engaging with the community on social media, A/B testing landing pages. I know that everyone sitting on this call is a digital native. You guys grew up with, learning how to spin up Tumblr accounts. I don't know if Tumblr is big now, but maybe like when you were in high school, Tumblr was kind of big. You probably had your own blogs. You probably had your own micro blogging that you did. Some of you may have social media accounts that you have thousands of followers for. Those are all things, even though they're personal projects, you can use the language that you see, the direct language that you see in this job description, to be able to put that on your resume, even if that was your own personal project, and you can spend a couple months building that out. Another thing might be like a sales experience. That's exactly what Vadim did, right? Prospecting and cold calling. Okay, you don't have to wait for anybody to start doing some cold calling. Maybe you could say, you know what, I'm going to start a digital marketing agency now that helps people figure out how to use Facebook ads, because I've done it for my own thing, right? Now you can pick up the phone and call a small business that's struggling right now and set up a digital marketing campaign for them. And even if they pay you $100 for it, that's something that you can add to your resume that you did. You did that cold calling to get those customers. And now you have some of that experience in sales, and Trustpilot, that company, is going to look at you and say, yeah, you did it for yourself. You're definitely going to be able to do it successfully for our startup. So again, this is not rocket science. You can look directly in these job ads to figure out how can you spend time on your own to then tell that story that tells people that you are now marketable and you can do that job.
Great. Now, speaking of that story, obviously all of you are thinking about your resume and how to make sure that it shows credibility, how to make sure that you can basically communicate your own narrative in the most effective way possible. So we do want to make sure that, we talk about what that means from the perspective of your resume, or even how you should go about telling your story and positioning your narrative. And this is actually an important thing to remember. The spray and pray approach just does not work. It never really has, and it certainly does not now. Gone are the days where you could, let's say, maybe mail your resume to, well, you guys don't use snail mail at all, but all right, I'm dating myself here. But back in the day, people used to mail physical copies of resumes, okay? And maybe you could format it really nice and pretty it up, and maybe even you can show up in person at that office and try to talk to the hiring manager, right? That stuff never really happens. And so now you have to figure out more effective ways to get in front of people. And the last thing you should be doing is just applying to a bunch of jobs and trying to get a response that way. Now, are you going to get a job potentially, or do you have some chance of getting a job if you do apply to 50 or 100 positions a day? Of course it's possible. Anything's possible, but it's not necessarily the most effective use of your time. Okay. And the first thing that we wanted to talk about in terms of telling your story and looking credible to employers is what a modern day resume even means. In other words, how do people even interact with you or become aware of you? And you can't talk about that without mentioning the importance of something hopefully you all have been already thinking about a lot, which is LinkedIn. LinkedIn is effectively your storefront. It's your story, and the first thing people most likely see before they even look at the resume. And so, some of you might think, oh, I already know this. I have a great LinkedIn profile. That's great. But for the ones that don't, we encourage you to prioritize that as a web property that you continue building out for the foreseeable future, and understand that most of your connections that you're building and trying to foster will happen in that space. And so that space is highly valuable real estate. And we're also going to give a bunch of tips right now to people that do understand already the importance of LinkedIn and how they could have that strategy work for them to increase the chances, again, of landing a role. We had a guy yesterday who just got a job at Microsoft, and he's working at IBM, who ran one of our free weekly sessions. And he said he thinks the only reason why he got that job at Microsoft right now, and he said, by the way, that his income was doubled from that move from IBM to Microsoft, is because he had a great LinkedIn profile. As a matter of fact, the recruiter that reached out to him said, you have an amazing LinkedIn profile. That's the very first thing they said. So it is very much so going to continue to be important. So a few quick tips. First of all, as you can see, this gentleman here, Ram, he has a good headshot of himself. in the photo. Really simple feedback, but don't have a picture of your whole family, don't have a picture with your dog. I mean, sometimes that stuff works because it could be a little bit personable, shows that you're a family person, for example, but really this is a place to be professional. This is a place where you want them to see your face and remember it, or, you know, if you met them at some kind of event or met them on some kind of conference call, they'll see that face and they'll know exactly who it is. By the way, this person we had on an old slide presentation that we did, and I pulled up a most recent picture, and this guy leveled up. He was a product manager at another startup earlier on for the last screenshot that we had of him, and now he's at Facebook. So clearly the fact that he prioritizes LinkedIn made him seem credible, and he's running product at Facebook now. The next thing that people will see is that About You section. It's right above it's right below the photo, but it's still above the fold. The real estate on the page that is visible first when people land is the most valuable real estate, right? That's why it's called above the fold. It's actually an old newspaper term. When newspapers are folded, you fold it open. This is above the fold, okay? But above the fold in digital terms means it's in the area of the screen that you can see. This is the first exposure that people get to your story. This is my current story. It could be longer, it's shorter. That's completely up to you, but it should add some credibility, and the narrative should be adjusted to what you're looking to get now. It's adding credibility. Again, what have you done that should make this person want to look deeper into your experience? And also, what makes you credible? Who else have you worked with? What else have you done that speaks to your abilities and speaks to the fact that if you are brought onto a role, you're going to add value. And more importantly, you're not going to be you're not going to be hiring a decision that somebody regrets down the line.
So you might be wondering, well, where do I even start if I've never created a profile like this and I don't have that much experience or any experience? You probably do have some story that you could talk about. You have projects that you worked on. You have clubs maybe that you've led or contributed to, maybe internships that you've done. If you don't have any of that, then it's time to do some of that, nights and weekend stuff that we talked about. So you have stories to tell in that profile that Vadim mentioned. But don't feel like you have to recreate it from scratch. You probably have your own role models that you follow, right? It could be leaders, it could be executives at companies, it could be influencers, anybody that you like, that you follow. Just take a look at their profile. I mean, this is exactly what we did when we were starting off. This is Jeff Weiner, who's actually the CEO of LinkedIn. And you can look at somebody. You can bet that the CEO of the biggest professional social networking website hopefully has a pretty well built out social networking profile. So I would just look at even his profile, but it could be really anybody's. Look at how they structure it. Look at how they talk about themselves in their story. And obviously these people are really successful. So you're going to take some nuggets from them. You might look at some people that worked at LinkedIn that maybe graduated last year that are a little bit closer to your age. See how they describe their profile, and you can always emulate that person and look at that and copy them. But
well, one thing I was going to add, Sergey, is remember, this isn't actually your resume. It is the first opportunity for somebody to interact with you and your personal brand. So this isn't a place to basically talk about everything you've ever done, but it is a place to be outcomes driven and outcomes oriented, as you'd see in the description of the previous roles that Jeff here describes.
That's
Sergey,
right.
do you have something to add?
Yeah, so I mean, we can move on to the next slide, but what I was going to say is, like, again, it doesn't actually make sense for you to just create a profile there and just have it sit there and hope that magic happens. That won't happen, because there's obviously a lot of noise out there. So the next thing you do right after you build out that profile is actually just connect with as many people as possible. Again, you have people in your network, friends, family, friends of your parents, internships that you've done, people that they know, right? So any person that you've ever met in a personal or professional setting, you can add there, because the way that LinkedIn works is once you have enough of a network, even like 100 people built out, you're going to start to see second connections and third connections. What is it? The Kevin Bacon thing, third degree of Kevin Bacon, whatever. We're all like 2 or 3 degrees separated from Kevin Bacon. And that's because people that 6 degrees of Kevin Bacon. So people that know someone else, it means you can actually get in front of people. One thing that I see some really smart students do, right? So I work at NYU at the Entrepreneurial Institute. And what I'll have is students will reach out to me and say, Sergei, I saw that you were connected with Michelle at HubSpot, which is a publicly traded marketing company that a lot of people know about. And I know this person's interested in a job at HubSpot, but she didn't ask me for an introduction for a job at HubSpot. She does it in an actually more creative way. She says, I'd love to speak to Michelle if you could introduce me with her, because I want to hear about her experience working at HubSpot. I heard it's a really cool company, and I want to hear what her experience is like and if she agrees. So it's a networking opportunity. She wants to build a relationship. It's really easy for me to email Michelle and say, hey, I have this really smart go-getter student that wants to learn about your experience at working at HubSpot. Odds are that Michelle is going to agree for that conversation. So it's a way for you to build a relationship, learn about what it's like to work at that company, soft pitch yourself and say, that's really cool. I've done some inbound marketing and social media marketing in the past. I'd love to hear more about your story. And then later you can then ask for an introduction based on a job that might be a fit. So you can only do that once you start adding people. Vadim is going to show you exactly what you can actually say when you're adding people on LinkedIn, whether they're already in your network or whether you're just adding people that you don't even know, but they just work at cool companies that you want to work at.
And by the way, a quick note, if you're taking notes right now, we encourage that as you're kind of processing this information and trying to make sense of it for yourself. I personally take notes in every single meeting, and then I would right now as well. But don't fret, you don't have to take screenshots of everything. Actually, at the end, we're going to have an opportunity for people to fill out a survey. And if you fill out the survey, you will be able to get these slides. So we want to make sure that you can capture this as a resource as well. Okay, so we've talked about building out your LinkedIn profile, which is the modern resume. We've talked about adding connections so that you're basically 2 degrees of separation away from most people. And again, you're already 6 degrees of separation away from basically everybody in the world because of how connections work and networks work. The third step is, okay, well, what do I actually say? How do I make sure that I'm building my network effectively? And I think there's a question if the recording is going to be posted somewhere. Sean, you probably have an answer for that. Okay, great. The next step is actually building relationships. So first, you start with your network. Trust me, you know more people than you think, unless you never interact with anybody ever. You at the very least can start with people within your school, your classmates, professors, and the like, and then go from there. But what about actually building your new network, right? Well, again, every time you go to a new event or attend a new call like the one we're in, you should be adding people on LinkedIn. By the way, we encourage you to add Sergei and myself on LinkedIn. Just add a quick note that says, hey, I attended your session, and then we'll happily accept you on LinkedIn. But what do you do beyond that? Well, you can add people cold as well. But there's a method to doing that effectively, okay? First of all, don't be that person that adds people and goes for an ask right away. In other words, if you don't know somebody and you're asking them for something right away, typically they won't respond favorably. They still might respond. If you word it in a good way, you still might get some responses. But people like to develop a relationship first on LinkedIn. So your first step is to have some language ready and set up when you're adding new context, right? We had a button here that literally said, oops, okay, hold on. Connect, right? When you connect with somebody, if you click on more, there's a drop down that says connect with a note. And so you can actually have an introductory note that you send to people that are relevant to you when you're reaching out. So here's one example. Hi, Dan, wanted to see if you'd be open to connect because I'm always looking to learn from technology leaders working on interesting products. Thanks, and hope you have a great week, right? That's really no pressure. I seem pretty personable in that note, right? Again, you should use your own language there, but hopefully this person's relevant. So for example, if you're graduating with an engineering degree and you're connecting with people that might be interested in connecting with engineers, you're gonna have a higher chance of making that connection. So make sure you're finding relevant people to connect to. Here's another new note that you can write when adding new context. Hi, Michelle, would love to connect on LinkedIn. I'm relatively new to the field of tech, right, which most people will be if they're graduating soon. And I'm always interested in learning more from other professional industry. And that's great. That's all you have to say. You're being sincere in this situation. You're being honest. You're not asking for anybody. You're not selling. This is exactly the type of refreshing thing that people like to see. And by the way, in the real world, when you're going out to network in person, once we're able to do that again, that's the same approach you should be using as well, right? You should be personable and you should be yourself, and that's how real trusted relationships get built. But okay, you added a bunch of people. They connected with you, right? You grew your connections from 200 to 300 because you've been really busy adding people that are relevant to you. Now what? Well, you should actually engage with them over time, right? Maybe take a few weeks, like some of their posts. If you like them, right? Comment on some of the posts if you have something interesting to say. But then afterwards, once you establish some initial relationship, then you can actually start engaging with some of these people and actually having an ask. And asking for a call is incredibly important during this time, right? If you're already connected, people are more than willing to help if they think they can be helpful. That last part is actually important. The same thing goes with mentors and advisors. If someone's going to agree to be a mentor for you, it's because they think they can help you. And people want to be helpful. And that's also why it's important to be specific about your ask. Okay. So here, when I'm asking for a call with somebody that I'm already connected to, I'm saying, hi, first name, would you be open to connecting over a short call in the next week or so I can learn a bit about your experience working as a, let's say, product manager. I'm exploring this as a career now and would highly value your feedback given your experience. Thank you. So notice I didn't say, hey, I want to pick your brain. Hey, can we meet for coffee? You know, I want to spend an hour of your time without giving you anything in return. I have a very specific ask. I want to learn about your career because I'm looking for a career in this discipline. Again, not everybody will respond, but some people will. And because you're being direct, because you're being brief and respectful of them and their time, you're more likely to get yeses other than nos. Anything else you want to add, Sergei?
No, that was good. Yeah, I mean, I think being specific, and I want to reiterate that just because you're young and you don't have a lot of experience doesn't mean that people don't want to help you. In fact, they more often than not do, especially if you're reaching out to, so oftentimes it's actually very experienced people will want to help you, but you might be reaching out to people that are 2 or 3 years older than you that have already gotten cool jobs, and they remember exactly what it was like when they were graduating and desperate for opportunities. And those people sometimes are the best people to reach out to because they really resonate with your desire to learn and want to get into these organizations. So asking for help is one of the biggest things that I think that I want to reiterate. Don't be afraid to ask for help because those who don't ask will never get the help.
Great. So we know people love actual tangible stories, and we know people love actual examples of how some of these things are accomplished. So we're going to show you some real emails that we sent to accomplish exactly what we just told you about. And there's a reason why I have these 3 logos here in front of you. It's because when 5 years ago, when I was looking to transition jobs, I was looking for a job as a product manager. And within a week or so, I ended up getting interviews, maybe a couple weeks, at all 3 of these big brands, Stack Overflow, Grubhub, and Trello. Probably Grubhub is the one that you all are familiar with the most. So we're going to talk about a few important things right now that actually increase your chances of getting into something like this. And that is the importance of actually making the ask. Asking for introductions or actually asking for a call like we talked about a few minutes ago. So here are some real examples. I'm going to look at my left screen here. I'm still with you, but you can just pay attention to the slide. I was looking for a role here at Stack Overflow. I'll start with that story. And I wanted to see if I can get my foot in the door. It just so happened that I worked with a gentleman that was in a sales role at Stack Overflow. Now, he didn't know me at all. We never interfaced, but we worked together at that company, Yodel, where I told you I had that formal sales training program back in Boston. And I wrote him this relatively simple email that I'll kind of breeze through. But look, I started off directly with my ask, directly with why I'm emailing. I'm not sure if you remember me, but we worked together. Okay, that should catch his interest already. We worked together, right? So there's a reason why I'm reaching out. Then I gave him a quick overview of my story of why I'm reaching out to him. Again, being very, very direct, literally saying, I want to learn more about this role. And then I basically asked him for some feedback. Should I apply through the website? Here's my resume. Either way, I'd like to learn more about the position. That's it. And by the way, this email's a little bit long. Your emails don't have to be that long, but I want to show you exactly what I sent about 5 years ago, and this is what I did. So here was his response. It was actually kind of interesting. He said, hey, I vaguely remember you. Okay, well, that's good. I vaguely remembered him too. I just knew that he was in the department next to me, but he was being upfront, and yeah, it was true. We didn't interact. That said, this is a gentleman that wanted to be helpful, right? He said, I'm happy to do whatever I can on my side. So he asked for a resume, and then he asked for a call. And look, I mean, this is where someone's literally handing you an opportunity. You have to take advantage of the opportunity. You might be new. You might feel a little bit uncomfortable getting a call with somebody like that. If you want opportunities, you have to be more proactive. And of course, if he asked me for a call, I'm going to jump on a call. And he said, he actually even CC'd another gentleman or woman, I believe, Alexandra, within the company. It was her assistant, his assistant, I believe. But already I'm engaging with more people in the company that are aware of my name. He even said, if you'd rather not, of course, we don't have to talk. But again, he's giving me an option to talk. You have to say yes. There's a reason why he said that. Now, he's a sales guy. He was a VP of sales. He loves talking on the phone, I'm sure. And so for somebody like him, that made sense. And by the way, throughout that phone call, I learned exactly what the interview process was like. I learned exactly what it's like to work at that company, their culture, and I got a better sense of whether or not I'd like actually working there. So that was a very valuable call. And I ended up getting an interview at that company. I'll tell you a quick story before we move on to Sergei's story. And this is how I got an interview at Grubhub, basically in that similar time frame. You can see November 2015. I was connected to this woman, Maria, who happened to be a VP of engineering at, it was called Seamless at the time before Grubhub acquired Seamless. And I should say maybe it was the other way around. But either way, she was a VP of engineering there, by the way. I just checked it out. She's already CTO there, so she moved on up. And it was a simple note. Hope you had a good Thanksgiving. I saw that we're connected on LinkedIn. By the way, we didn't know each other. We were just connected. I have no idea how. We just connected over the years. Maybe when I was working on my sales tech company before, or she was one of the people that kind of went through my flow. And again, I was very direct. I thought I'd email you directly about an opening I saw at Grubhub for a technical product manager. By the way, on her LinkedIn, it said, reach out to me if you're interested in opportunities at Grubhub. So she basically had the opening there. She was looking to place more technical roles, and this is a technical manager. Technical people are highly valuable, and the good ones are hard to find. So I knew there was at least some chance that she would respond to me. And I actually, again, gave her a quick one-liner about why I'm valuable. Again, I didn't write my whole story, but only the part of the story that was relevant. I didn't talk about my sales experience, my finance experience. But I did tell her that I've launched products with a few of my own startups, and I've also led product management at a video software company, which is exactly what I did. And that's it. I had an ask at the end as well. You have to have an ask. Would you be comfortable introducing me to the hiring manager? Or should I apply to the website directly? And she ended up responding, and she said, you need to apply to the website still and go through proper channels. But once I see your application come in, I will introduce you to the hiring manager. And she followed up, and I got an interview at Grubhub as well.
So I want to actually reiterate something that Vadim said, and actually hopefully you're noticing through this process what's actually happening. Vadim is reaching out to these people directly. He's not sending a cover letter to some ether somewhere that maybe some HR person will see. By the way, you should be applying, sending applications. That is a way to get a job. We've gotten some jobs that way, but it's slower and it's less likely to guarantee. And it's one of the things that you should be doing. You should be following up with direct outreach. And these emails that Vadim is showing are actually sort of a version of a cover letter. It's a way to make an impression. It's a direct way to get in front of someone. You may still need to submit a cover letter somewhere, but your email is actually functioning as a cover letter right there. So you can actually even sometimes guess the email address of someone and send them a note, as long as you're very specific player and I'm just saying like really generic things that don't actually tell me who you are. Anybody can say they're a team player, they're really eager, they're XYZ. Don't say the things that anybody can say and just put their name instead of yours. Talk about specific stories. Think about what would make that person care, and what would make them feel like I'm actually right for this specific job. And that's exactly what you mentioned in that email. And even in your cover letters, you should be talking about that. So the specificity, connecting the dots for people as to why you make sense, being selective about what part of your story you tell that makes sense for that opportunity, rather than sending everybody the same exact email that's generic, is what gets people opportunities.
And by the way, really quickly, this is the email that Guy sent introducing me. And here, even though in the beginning he said, hey, I vaguely remember you, after we had that phone call, after we kind of reconnected, and he realized that, I can actually talk and that I actually had some good experience, he said, hey, here's a former colleague of mine with great experience, right? So he was already selling me in that note, and no one's going to say no to interviewing you if you get that kind of an introduction, okay? But now I want to hear Sergei's story.
So Look, I mean, part of the process is rejection. You will get no's, and the no's suck, and the no's kind of make you feel like, am I worthy enough? Am I good enough? Should I even be pursuing this? I hope to impart on you today that just because you get a no, just because you even might get 10 no's or 20 no's, doesn't mean you're not good enough for something. And I'll tell you an example of an organization that I was really eager to work for. It was a dream job. It was a company called Venture for America that I applied for, a role that was a reach for me, honestly. It was a director of programs role that I was not very qualified to get, but I hustled. And I had some interesting background, like I told you guys about a second ago, working on my own startup projects. And because of that, they gave me a chance. And I actually ended up going through a bunch of interviews with them. It was only a small organization at the time, a nonprofit, but 11 people in the organization. And I had 3 rounds of interviews, and they gave me assignments to do. And I was basically, this interview process lasted like a month, and everybody seemed to like me. And I felt like it was a shoo-in that I was going to get the job. But then I got this email from their COO, a nice rejection, better than many rejections that you get. She was specific. She even apologized because it was a drawn out process. I met with Andrew, the CEO. By the way, you might have seen Andrew Yang, the guy who was running for president. And this is before he ran for president, before anybody knew him really, but he was starting this little startup nonprofit. Met with him, thought we jived. It worked really cool, really well. But unfortunately, they had some concerns. They thought that I wasn't able to really have the right skills to do the job ultimately, and they thought they could get somebody better, and that's really exactly what they told me. I was dejected. I was upset. I ended up taking a job that I did not like nearly as much as this job, but that was sort of the reality. But a no is not always a full no, and it's not always permanent. You can see the timestamp here. This was in 2013 when I was interviewing for that role, right, a while ago. But I ended up taking that experience at the crappy startup that I joined right after. To be honest, it wasn't a glamorous job. It was a startup that was kind of struggling, but it was a sales job. Use that then to start my own company. My own company that I started, it wasn't a blowout success, but I did launch a product. I did get paying customers. I did get really cool advisors. And I used that experience then to come back to Eileen. She was the COO. 2 years later, I came back to her, and there was a better job. It was an entrepreneur in residence job. It was to pay 6 figures. And it was a job that I knew I was well positioned to do just 2 years later. And so I came back and I saw that they listed this job. By that time, they grew to a $5 million a year nonprofit with 30 employees, that they wanted somebody to run entrepreneurship programs for them. And instead of just applying, I had Eileen's email address, and I emailed her directly. And this is what I emailed. A bit of a long email, but the reason why it was long is because I wanted to make sure that she understands what it is that I did in those short 2 years that now made me much more of a fit for that organization. So we'll send you these slides if you fill out that survey, but instead of going through the whole thing, I'm just going to highlight what I did here. A quick update, what happened between then and now. Joined that startup, ended up starting my own company. What did I do in those companies? Again, this is a highlight reel. I'm not telling you all of the things I did, but I did launch a working product, got paying customers, pitched dozens of investors, which is exactly the kind of thing they were trying to teach their entrepreneurs. And so I was going to now take all of these lessons that I learned in these 2 years and teach your people how to do it, and build out programs to help you learn how to do it. And I said in the end, I can be uniquely positioned to mentor your companies, your accelerator companies, and run these programs based on this experience. Again, 2 years passed. You might think that, why would she care who I am 2 years? And if they said no, then they don't like you. So why would you ever go back to a company that rejected you after putting you through such a long and grueling process? Well, let me tell you, they put me through another grueling process in 2015. So she replied immediately to this email. And they put me through a process where, she was actually interested in hearing from me, and that email was compelling enough to get me a meeting. I ended up having to meet with like 6 people. I did assignments, I did networking, and they still didn't give me a job offer, but I knew I was well positioned. And they told me, we're still interviewing people. They were dragging me along, and I was sitting there thinking, what can I do that's entrepreneurial, that's going to convince these people that they need to give me this job? I'm the guy to do this job. So what I did was I took matters into my own hands. I did my own research to try and give them suggestions how I can improve their programs. I reached out to people that have gone through their programs and interviewed them without permission, interviewed people that went through their programs and asked them, how can VFA make your programs better? And then I created an email that told them exactly how I would make the program better based on conversations that I had with their own fellows, and something that they had never done in the years that they developed these programs. I mean, they did surveys and stuff like that, but they hadn't done those kind of interviews because they didn't have time. They were a startup. And they were so impressed by me taking that initiative that they did end up giving me that job. And I ended up having a lot of cool experiences. I ran all entrepreneurship programs for them in Detroit and Philadelphia. When they decided to start a venture capital fund, nobody else was willing to do it. Nobody else had the experience to do it. Neither did I, by the way, but I took it upon themselves to do that job. And by then I could then say that I had experience starting venture capital funds, all because I didn't take that no at face value. And I came back 2 years later and asked for that opportunity and created that opportunity for myself. So I want to leave you with that little piece of advice that just because you got that no once or twice doesn't mean it's forever, and treat it as a relationship that may come back in the future and work out in the future as well.
That's a really great story. So don't forget, a no is not always a no. And you do have to follow up sometimes to make sure that you get on people's radars. No one's going to do it for you. And don't make assumptions for other people. You know, we often think, oh, they didn't respond because they don't like me or because they don't want to waste time with me. But you're now giving an answer on behalf of somebody else, and you have no idea what's going on in their life or if they're busy. And so there's no reason to make assumptions there, and following up can be very critical in actually getting you opportunities, because remember, most people are not doing that.
Yeah, when I wrote to her, by the way, that month later after interviewing with 3 people, I still didn't get a yes. I genuinely was like, what is going on here? And yeah, they told me straight up, listen, Sergei, we like you, but we're still interviewing other people. They were trying to keep their options open. And that's when I decided, you know what, I'm going to show them why no one else is going to work harder than me in this job, and no one else in this interview process is going to do what I'm doing right now. And that's when I had that idea to sort of do additional work, and ended up getting the job. So again, just because you're not hearing back, you know, follow up, see what happens, see what they tell you, and then maybe you can go above and beyond and get that role.
Awesome. And by the way, we appreciate that everybody's waiting patiently. This event is going till about 1:30, so we'll make sure we'll save time to answer some questions. We just have a handful of slides to get through now, and then we'll make sure to get to your questions. Okay, so just hang in there. Great. So a few more quick stories, and then we'll go to the questions. Sometimes you have to show up and go to where the person is that you're looking to connect with. Now, obviously right now that exist. In the future, of course, they will. So hopefully you take this takeaway and remember it for the future. But also this can be applied for virtual or remote meetings where you might get an understanding of who might be there ahead of time, and you make it a point to show up and be there for that meeting. Sergei and I attended a breakfast meeting this morning because we thought, well, it might be valuable to be there because there's going to be some accelerator people there and various investors and the like, and we already connected with a bunch of folks because we were there and we showed up to that meeting. And my quick story is actually how I got my next job after that company Yodel. I actually got a job as a sales director, right? As a sales leader, even though I had very little sales experience at that point. I had only been at Yodel for about 10 months, and I got a job at a company called Privy. And the way that I got that job is I saw that the founder of the company that I was interested in was actually tabling at an event in Cambridge. And I really wanted to get the job, but I knew that if I just applied to that role, I wouldn't get it. Part of the reason I wanted to get the job, by the way, is I knew that they had just got into Mass Challenge, which is an accelerator program in Boston. And I wanted to have the chance to go through an accelerator without, you know, having to start my own company at the time because I didn't have any ideas that I could work on. And here was this credible entrepreneur that maybe would give me the time of day. So instead of just emailing him, instead of just applying, I decided to show up. I came to the event, and there he was, the CEO of this company, actually tabling at the event. pitching his startup idea. And I showed up and said, hey, Ben, hey, really good to meet you. By the way, I wanted to share with you that I've actually been selling products to small businesses for the last 10 months. And I hit my quota every single month. And I think I've really figured out how to position value to small businesses and restaurants. And I know that you're targeting the same exact market with your startup Privy. I'd love to talk about the position. And we ended up, he took me up on the offer. He was impressed that I showed up in person. He was impressed that I showed up, period. And he actually set up an interview afterwards. I ended up meeting the whole team. Within 2 weeks, I got hired and I was the first paid employee at that company. Now, I did take a pay cut, but I also got equity in that company, and I got the job founding sales director. Was my title. So just by showing up in person, my title leveled up. I went from being an account executive to founding sales director. And even though that company, I ended up being at only for 6 months because they ran into financial troubles. Because of that, I was then able to get a really cool gig and move to New York City afterwards. So again, continuing to level up, but also showing up to where the person that you're looking to connect with is, in part because almost nobody else is actually putting that kind of effort in. So remember, if you put that effort, if you're targeted and you're showing up, you'll be much more likely to land the opportunity that you want. Whether you want to get a job, by the way, or whether you're more entrepreneurial and want to start your own company, you have to be resourceful like that. You have to be where the resources are. Speaking of resources, this is what we want to close with. We want to share some resources that might be valuable for you all right now, and that have been valuable even to us and the students that we work with and instruct.
So there are, and again, Vadim and I are a little bit biased in that we tend to spend our time in tech, and that's where we know the communities and networks. So if you aren't interested in tech, these resources will be helpful. But again, this networking that you're talking about is the most important thing to do, but you should still be looking through these different portals to figure out what opportunities are there out there. So here are some tech specific portals that you might access. AngelList, I mentioned, they show all the startups in the city, actually all across the country, that are hiring, what they're paying, and you can look exactly what those companies are through there. There's some other, I'm not going to list through all of them, but these are all local tech communities. They show jobs. There's forums there. Go and explore what the opportunities are, and maybe that'll inform who you add on LinkedIn and do the networking with, and then also the jobs that you apply in. And by the way you search for jobs should be creative as well. You might be familiar with some job titles, right, based on what you might learn from career services and some of the other departments in the university, but you're not going to know all the different jobs out there. So you might go on job boards like Indeed or Google Jobs and LinkedIn. These are all aggregators. And you might just type in keywords like entrepreneurial or venture or early stage or something else, other keywords, community, right? And then type in company name, or just even leave it open just to see what's out there. Again, you might not know all the different jobs, so don't just be looking for those specific jobs. Type in some of these interesting keywords that might surface jobs that you're not even familiar with, and you can do it within all these aggregators that we mentioned right here. There's also tools like Glassdoor and Salary.com, where people will write on those platforms exactly what their interview experience is at specific companies. So if you're lucky enough to get an interview, let's say at a company like Google or Facebook or whoever else, high likelihood that there are people that talked about what the interview process was specifically on for those companies on websites like Glassdoor and the like. And then finally, join online communities. LinkedIn has communities you can join. Slack has communities that you can join as well, actually, now, that are specific to coding, design, sales, verticals like learning, education, etc. This is linkable, this is clickable rather. So when you get this PDF, or when you get this as a presentation, you'll be able to click into these communities and see exactly what they are. So join them, start talking, start engaging with people, because this is just the beginning of how you will build out these platforms.
And remember, job boards are only one resource. Some of the best jobs and positions and opportunities don't come from a job that's listed anywhere. They come from the relationships that you build through LinkedIn, through events and everything like that. You will start hearing about opportunities because once people see you out there, they'll remember you and they'll keep you in mind. And some of these might come in a month, 2 months, 6 months, 2 years from now. But that's exactly how the recruiting game works in the end of the day. So we wanted to kind of wrap things up with a few comments about being entrepreneurial, about your career. By the way, all of these tactics that are used to get opportunities at other companies can also be tactics that you use to start your own business, to get your own initiative off the ground. That's why this talk is called How to Be Entrepreneurial About Your Career. We have to be. There are new careers being created right now at a much faster rate than ever before. Right? For example, self-driving car engineer was not a thing 10 years ago, or maybe 15 years ago, right? There are social media managers now that was not a thing 15 years ago. There are constantly new industries being created because innovation is continuing to grow at a consistently more and more rapid rate. And because there's more industries and more positions, that means that you'll be able to transition jobs in the future in an easier way. You'll be building skills that can be transferred to other careers, completely other careers that you may have no experience in. Sergei and I have done that many times. We went from finance, sales engineering, product. Then we got into education and became instructors and teachers, and now work in higher ed and have our own education company. You can always change gears. You will change your mind about your career several times. Some of you may get on a path that you love and something that you're passionate about and stay on it for 20 years. Some of you may 5-10 years in, decide I want to do something completely different. It is why it's critical to be more entrepreneurial about your career and think about it in a way that is more resourceful than anything else. Because again, we promise you, a lot of people unfortunately are lazy and they will not go the extra mile and they will not get the best opportunities.
And part of the way that you can be entrepreneurial about your career, and hopefully a big takeaway from this presentation, is that the way that you communicate yourself and the way that you communicate your value is really, really important. And so you need to customize that for the opportunities that you want. And part of that is it's practice and learning how to do that. So hopefully you had some of those takeaways. If you're interested in learning about some of the different jobs available out there in tech. That's why we do our Wednesday sessions. If you just go to school16.co, you can sign up and you'll get emails about Wednesday sessions where you can learn from people in some of these jobs if you just want to get exposure to what those jobs are like. We also just announced, and we've been interviewing people for our 9-week program where we're helping people actually network directly in small class sizes with these instructors and learn about sales, product, operations, and marketing roles. So it's a kind of an all-encompassing program where you get to learn about all these different roles and meet people across those roles in small class sizes. So if you're interested in learning more about that program, you can go to school16.co/program. And then finally, if you want to get this deck, the only way that we can send it to you is if you fill out the survey. And we also ask you to fill out the survey. It takes 1 minute. We just want to know what was valuable about this session, how we can improve sessions like this going forward. So please take a second to fill out that survey after this call, and you'll get this deck with all these emails and everything that we just talked about. And now we'll pass the baton to Sean and some of the other folks on this call that we hope you hear from as well.
That's right. So you're going to hear from PPD and OCS soon, but right after that, we're going to get into the Q&A. So if you had any burning questions, things you thought were unanswered, or even stuff that you think pertains to you that you want to have answered by these experts, please start to fill in the chat. So with that said, PPD?
Okay, so I was just going to say for the PPD folks, I think you probably know this, but just to be safe, PPD supports the Gabelli undergraduate community. We are here to help you. You can feel free to email gsbppd@fordham.edu or the industry advisor, which is listed on the page. We layer on top of our wonderful colleagues of OCS. We are doing workshops. We're doing internship and job opportunities for Gabelli students on top of the handshake. So please, please keep your eye out on gsbppd@fordham.edu. We work with partnership with our lovely Fordham Foundry colleagues. So if there is an entrepreneurism focus or just any sort of more entrepreneurial spirit, Sean, Al, and I will work together, and they are more than happy to do one-on-one advising for the Gabelli students. So we're all here for you, and don't hesitate.
Fantastic. And on the next slide, we'll have a word from the Office of Career Services.
Hi, guys. Thank you guys so much for tuning in. Thank you, Sean. Thank you, Sergei and Vadim. That content was so helpful, and it's good to hear because this is exactly what I tell students in appointments. So thanks again. And for those of you guys on the call who are just wondering what career services can do for you during this time, our resources are almost identical to normal time when we're in person, but everything is obviously virtual now. So you can schedule a Zoom or a phone appointment with one of our counselors through Handshake, which I have a feeling almost everyone on this call has been on before, but if you haven't, feel free to use that link on the slide. We also have a resource library, which has a couple of the websites that Sergei and Vadim mentioned, in addition to some other ones that you might want to check out during your search. Also pay attention to the events tab, which will have webinars like this. We're having a virtual career fair in a couple weeks, so just keep posted on that page. Seniors, please let us know what you're up to. If you are looking for a position, let us know how we can help you. If you've found something, also let us know that as well. And also on there, my email address, if you have specific questions for me, if you just prefer to like touch base with an individual rather than trying to schedule an appointment on your own, you can feel free to reach out to me. Thanks, guys.
All right, so we'll pause on the last slide while we go through a couple of the comments. But before we get to the comments, or sorry, the questions, I want to read off just a couple of comments that are in the chat. So this is from Akshath. Thank you so much, Sergei and Vadim. The presentation was extremely insightful, and I plan on applying these ideas to my own life. So I just want to make a quick comment there because, again, first off, I think that this is great feedback. So hopefully it lands in the survey, Akshath. But the other thing that I would call out is during this presentation, we covered a lot of different roles, you know, whether you want to work in sales, whether you want to be an engineer, whether you want to be a designer, and all together. You know, I also heard the presenters mention the versatility of the roles to where if you wanted to work in these roles as an employee, you could have the opportunity to create it. Or if you wanted to start a business as an entrepreneur, you can do that. One other kind of versatile point I wanted to call out is this is the same stuff that'll get you on Wall Street, that'll get you to be a curator in a museum, that'll get you to work in tech, that'll get you wherever it is that you want in the world. So consider this your utility belt for where you want your career to go, regardless of if you think it dwells within any of the vignettes that you heard here. So this is completely great information. And as I don't see a flood of questions coming in, I want to come back to Anastasia's question. So Anastasia's question was, what tech or product management industry websites or newsletters do you both read daily or weekly to learn about new events, contacts, and trends? Thanks. So what are you all reading? Sergei, Vadim.
Yeah, no, that's a great question. So I shared one in the chat, Tech New York Daily. I really like that one. They send what's going on in the tech industry, and actually they put exactly the jobs there as well that tech companies are hiring for. I also am pretty big into meetup.com. Now, there are all the meetups that are happening are now digital, but you can find a community for anything that you're interested on Meetup. And there are hundreds and sometimes thousands of people in those communities. You can actually email people directly or message people directly through Meetup that are inside of these communities. So just go to meetup.com and you can find, like, there's New York Tech Meetup, there's engineering specific ones, finance specific ones, whatever you can find. Join those communities and you can start commenting as well. Vadim, do you have any other newsletters or anything that you consume?
I don't have specific, I don't have specific communities, but I will tell you my strategy for staying up to date with this stuff. And that is making sure that I'm not just using social media for fun, but actually using it to learn. So on Twitter, for example, that's my following investors. I love following thinkers, leading thinkers in innovation. I love following leading thinkers in product and innovation as well. Product-based innovation, I should say. So follow all the people on LinkedIn. Those would be the two social networks that are most relevant, that are smart and intelligent, that you want to learn from or emulate. On Twitter, for example, they constantly have the people that are interested in people like that are interested in building their own personal brand will constantly be posting. And that is your opportunity to quote unquote slide into their DMs or just, slide into their comments and actually contribute some of what you think might be valuable here and there. And by the way, maybe 2 months from then, they'll share an internship opportunity and you can jump on board and apply to that as well. But yeah, instead of like following newsletters, I more so follow relevant people on social media. And that's how I stay up to date with the most recent stuff.
Perfect. Oh, good.
I was going to address Tyler's question. I don't know if that's what you were going to mention, Sean.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I can read it out for you. So a bit of specific, more individualized question. Does anyone have advice for a Fordham College Rose Hill junior/rising senior on pursuing a career in consulting? I'm interested in connecting further with GSB resources and contact points. So one GSB resource for you, Tyler, is certainly Cynthia and the good folks at PPD, because they definitely have their finger on the pulse of consulting. But just thinking outside the box, Sergei and Vadim, what do you got?
Yeah, so it's interesting, and I think, Tyler, exactly to Sean's point, the folks at PPD that have a lot of entrenched relationships with people in consulting will be able to give you a lot of great feedback on how to navigate that. Consulting, especially management consulting, assuming that's what you're talking about, like Deloitte, McKinsey, those types of brands that a lot of people want to get jobs in. A lot of those companies have pretty defined tracks of how they like to recruit people directly from undergrad and even actually from graduate programs as well. And you kind of want to make sure you follow that track. So the fact that you're a junior, you're asking this question is great, because by the time you're in your senior year, you want to make sure you're getting in front of employers in the way that they want you to get in front of them, because they're recruiting oftentimes even in the fall. But it's still a relationship building game. Like consulting organizations, management consultants, you want to prove to them that you're good at the core skills that they need, which is you need to be super organized. You need to take initiatives. You need to know how to use tools like Excel, for example, you need to be really native and good at, and because that's going to be the type of skills and tools that you're going to be using in those organizations. So talk to people that recently graduated and ask them, hey, what do you do day to day in your job? And how can I maybe spend some time on nights and weekends to skill up on these different platforms that are going to be important in consulting, so I can convince those top brand management consulting companies that they should hire me. And if you don't get into a top 3 or top 5 management consulting company, there are long tail, smaller consulting companies that do management consulting that you can start working with in the beginning of your career. And oftentimes those smaller companies, you can reach out to directly to the owners and managers and directors of those companies and network with them that way. So there might be more flexibility with some of the smaller consultants rather than the big ones where you have to follow a path.
Yeah, I really agree with that last point that Sergei made. I was going to say the same thing. Look at boutique firms, because later on, if you want to land in a bigger firm, you will already have some experience and you get a direct line into maybe some of the executives there. The other thing I will say is if you want to get into Big Four or one of the top brands, try to think outside the box around what role you could land there. Of course, there's the analyst in the iBanking or associate or consultant or whatnot. Let's say at McKinsey role or BCG that you might be applying to. But Ernst & Young, I know, has more positions like business analyst, right? So there are other types of positions that you might be able to get a higher chance of landing because they're a little bit less competitive. They're still going to be really competitive because you're looking at a top firm. And then once you get your foot in the door that way, maybe in a less competitive position at a big firm, then you can transition to another one. Again, just because one approach isn't working doesn't mean you can't try another one. But yeah, it's going to be still a relationship game.
And Sean, I'm jumping back in. Sorry. Did you want me to chat on this for a second or no?
No, please say a few.
I would say for the junior, I think it's Tyler. Do you want to type in quickly what's your major? Okay, yep. International political economy. So I think it's interesting to think about when you're a consultant, what area do you want to consult in? So for example, and you can feel free to give more information if you want in the chat. But for example, if you're really interested in, say, political consultant, I'm going to leverage off what the gentleman said and say, I have somebody who I advised, and they created their own political internet website where they gave international market research information every week. They did an article which they published. They kept doing that for literally months. They had graduated, they didn't have a job. They were very determined to be in that space, and they created their own website. just like what was discussed earlier. They did market research, political international, just like your major, and they ended up landing a job in Washington in the international political research space. So I do think that some of these ideas can really take you to the next level in jobs. So, you know, when you look at consulting, it really will depend. You may not be interested in tech consulting at all. Certainly the big four, the management consulting, both the large and boutique have a variety of consulting jobs. But, you know, let's see, sure, I'm considering M&A mainly because of the intersection between business and law. And so when you're looking at business and law, right, there's lots of ways to go. You can look at the restructuring space. That's finance oriented, but very, very legal. And those cases are going to court, and you need to understand the legal documents. You could be doing things like derivatives or exotics, and that's also very legal. So there's lots of different ways to brainstorm and put your two great interests together. And I think when you look at law, some people just go down to Washington, D.C. and try to, you know, you can work for the World Bank, you can work for, you know, IDF, there's a lot, IMD, I mean, you know, there's different organizations that people work at, like the World Bank and IMD, and then they go to law school or business school. So there's sort of other corporations besides financial services, but there's some in financial services and some spaces, particularly in financial services, that lend themselves. There's certainly the accounting. Even in accounting, there's one student that I worked with last year that went into legal consulting at accounting. And her name, I'm sure she won't mind, it's not a large audience, Rebecca Crum. You can reach out to her. And if you can't, feel free to email me at cbush5 and I will introduce the two of you. So you can go in the sort of finance route for specific legal areas, even the legal department. You could go into the consulting route, focus on legal. You could go into the political research route. Lots of different ways to go.
All right, so we're going to leave it there, but I just wanted to thank Sergei and Vadim for their time and expertise today. As you heard throughout the presentation, we're here for you. There's a ton of resources, and I hope that you take full advantage of them. So as you know, in order to get access to these slides, you have to go to school16.co/survey and take the survey in order to get access to the slides. Inside the slides, there's a bunch of good breadcrumbs for you to follow down. So, you know, I see on this slide here, there's Vadim and Sergei's email. Please reach out. You've got the websites and addresses to PPD and Career Services. Please reach out. And then for Fordham Foundry, please reach out again. We're going to upload the whole video onto our website. So I encourage you all to visit, to drop a line. If we can't meet face-to-face during this time, we definitely have access to Zoom. So no matter what time zone you're in or what you're going through on your career journey, I hope that you'll make full use for us. So that'll be it all. We'll catch you on the next one. Thanks again, Sergei and Vadim.
Thanks so much, man. Thanks for putting this together.
Good luck, everybody.
Cheers.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
Thank you. It was great, guys. Well done.